Today we had huge news from the Federal Reserve. The Fed holds rates steady and indicates 3 interest rate cuts coming in 2024. So the Fed is continuing the pause and now indicating that we have reached the peak rate and that we're likely going to reduce rates next year. Also, I was just watching Bloomberg News where one of the anchors said this.
They start in June and go 175 into the election.
Right now, there is a 74% chance of a rate cut at the March meeting for the Federal Reserve. That is what I'm looking at in terms of what people are expecting. If the Fed is currently talking about cutting rates, why would they wait until June? For politics, they could be accused of political interference either way, deciding on when they move.
So there you have it. We have a 74% chance of a rate cut in March of next year. March of 2024, rates are likely to begin coming down. And as a result, we saw a huge dump for the US dollar index. Markets are always forward looking towards the future. And when the market suspects that rates are coming down, well, cash is less valuable to store in the bank. So money begins to cycle out of cash and into assets such as stocks and crypto. And what are we seeing right now for the US stock market? This is the S&P 500 on the daily chart. On the left side of the screen, this peak right here is the 2022 all-time high at the start of 2022. And looking at our all-time high and where we are right now, we are about 2.5% away from hitting a new all-time high for the S&P 500. So I want to now talk about a common misconception that people have when it comes to Fed reducing rates. And a lot of people have shown this chart, and this chart is sort of misinterpreted where people say, well, when the Fed cuts rates, we have market downturn, right? As if the Fed cutting rates causes the market downturn. But that is the misconception that I'm addressing, because when the Fed cuts rates, it's normally in response to an economic crisis to release pressure off the economy. 2001 dot-com bubble. The Fed is reducing rates in response to the crisis. 2008 housing crisis. The Fed is reducing rates in response to that crisis. Even like during COVID recently, was in response to the crisis, right? If you look, this is actually a really good point, and that is this Fed pivot here during COVID, the market didn't crash because of the Fed pivot. It crashed because of the crisis. The COVID-19 pandemic caused a market downturn and caused, put a lot of pressure on the economy, halted the economy, and so the Fed reduced rates in response. So the Fed cutting rates does not equal market downturn. That is wrong. Economics is very complex. And that is not, it's never that simple. And also, when the Fed raises rates, it doesn't mean the market's going to go down either. It's never a simple answer. A lot of people admire Satoshi Nakamoto's genius in creating Bitcoin, but his genius actually goes a little further than that. If you look at the Bitcoin halving events, you have them plotted on your chart and you look at where they are with the S&P 500, and then you also bring up the US election cycle and plot that on the chart, well, they both line up pretty much at the same exact time. The halvings always take place during US elections, and this is something that is, in my opinion, intentional, done by Satoshi. Usually, we have the halving just before the election and inauguration. Same thing in 2021, halving takes place just before the election and inauguration. And in this case, that will happen once again. April will be the halving, then followed by the election. And usually, on average, what we have is a bullish market going into these election cycles. Turns out Satoshi's genius goes a lot deeper than we thought. There's a lot of news today, a lot of positive news for the markets. Things are starting to return, and it turns out that the smart money has been buying this dip and adding as we've seen the price come up all year long in anticipation for what we just saw today, which was the Fed basically confirming that there's not going to be more rate hikes. In fact, the next step is to reduce rates. And the smart money in the stock market also has been buying the dips, adding as we've come up in anticipation for what we just saw today and what's coming next year. And looking for where we are now to Bitcoin's all-time high, that is still another 61% to the upside. So there's a lot of opportunity still for Bitcoin being this far below its all-time high. Currently, we are still sitting in this falling wedge breakout, the largest falling wedge in Bitcoin history. We are still in the midst of hitting our first major target, which is 52,000. That is the extrapolation according to the textbook, not my opinion. Now, I want to talk about this ascending broadening wedge pattern, which we've been discussing for a very long time. There's actually reason to believe that this pattern may be at the completion zone. Looking at this diagram from the textbook, this is an ascending broadening wedge that we are in right now. The pattern may not be exactly the same as how the textbook shows it, and that goes for most patterns that you look at. It's not always exactly the same, but one thing that I'm noticing when I look at Bitcoin's 4-hour chart and the ascending broadening wedge that we are in, and then I look at the diagram here on the left, this diagram is starting to tell me that the point that we just bounced off of here is really starting to look like our confirmation bounce right here. This area right here is most likely what we're seeing right now for Bitcoin in this zone, that final bounce before reaching the high once again. So we are probably, now looking at how this is developed, looking at the textbook diagram, we're probably at the end of this pattern. We've gotten this bounce. We have so much positive news. The stock market's up. People are starting to get optimistic again, and the bearish thesis is pretty much being completely crushed. So the part of the market participants that have been holding on to their bearish bias for dear life are now going to have to start to flip, and they're going to have to start to buy at higher levels. And this is going to provide extra support, extra momentum, as you can no longer deny what the narrative is now. Right? So all the sideline people are going to probably start to pile in, and that's going to send us up, confirming the end of this pattern right here where we are now. And probably, most likely, guys, moving into Christmas or the new year, we would probably start to see Bitcoin really take off. And we should be good to go from the bullish side of things. And that brings us to the falling wedge breakout target that we were just discussing right here. So we'll see what happens if we get to that target. When we get to that target, is it going to be a resistance? What kind of consolidation might we get at a higher level? If you look at Bitcoin's current trajectory from our falling wedge low to where we are right now, there is a lot of room and a lot of potential for Bitcoin to play out a parabolic move. Then after hitting the textbook falling wedge breakout target, we get some sellers to step in, because the sellers usually step in, and the Bitcoin miners have not sold that much yet, and getting to a high price like 50,000 may encourage sellers to step in. That allows us to get a little bit of a correction, a consolidation, as demand continues to increase into March, right? This is where we have the possible Fed rate cut coming, right? As we just saw in the beginning of the video. And after something like that, the demand is likely going to pick up even more, sending us to much higher levels, breaking out. And then the month after the possible rate cut in March, then we have the halving in April. And that's how we can actually get to the all-time high and break it within this time period. Really, other than December, we're halfway through it, January, February, March, 3 months. And then 4th month is the halving. And seeing the all-time high within that time period is always possible. It's very possible. Usually Bitcoin reaches the all-time high a little faster than people want it to, and the opportunity to buy Bitcoin at meaningful levels becomes a fleeting event, right? It sort of gets away from you, and the price just goes to the moon post-halving. Of course, a lot of people are going to think I'm being too moon boyish and too bullish or whatever, but this is what Bitcoin always does for the halving periods. And we're also leaving some room here, keeping an open mind for these intermediate corrections along the way, right? It's never a straight line. And again, the people that are on the sidelines and the bears are going to have to start accepting the fact that they were probably wrong, and they're going to start buying at higher levels. The sideline crowd jumps in ahead of the masses, and then once we hit the new all-time high, the masses come back, and that's where we get the epic momentum in a true crypto bull market. Everything we've seen so far was really just the start. The total 3, the altcoin market cap, has barely even broken out. Let's go to the total 3 altcoins, right? Everything excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum. Look at this chart. You can see that back here in 2020, when we broke the red box of resistance, that's when the altcoins began the bull market for real. And now we're sitting at this point, if you're looking to the right side, where we're just starting to get above that red box of resistance. So what are we missing? We're missing the entire bull run, guys. We're missing the entire run here. And we know that there are big players stepping in. Blockchain technology is becoming useful. The blockchain technology is going to start getting investment from Silicon Valley, tech companies. We're going to get some real geniuses in the market that are going to start developing at high levels. And it's going to become, mainstream, like fully mainstream. BlackRock's here. I mean, we're pretty much set up perfectly in this industry, guys. We just have a great setup right now. So it's still early. Total 3 hasn't broken out. Bitcoin's below the all-time high. So opportunity is still here. Even if you are in that crowd that I discussed that's on the sidelines, just understand the opportunity is still here, right? And Bitcoin's still below the all-time high. So you haven't missed much just yet. This is only the start. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed. Smash the like, subscribe. Join Patreon to see what altcoins I'm buying. Follow me on Twitter. Sign up for Kraken Pro as well. We're going to have more content on Kraken Pro coming out very soon. And I'll see you guys in the next video.